Hi everyone, in this video we will learn about functions. So far we have seen this main function and one more function that was println that we used to print something on the console. But we are not limited to these two functions. There are a lot of predefined functions available for many things, and also we can create our own functions according to the requirement. The point is, it is always a good idea to divide the given problem into many smaller problems. And to solve the small problems, we can create functions. So the function is a block of statements that can perform a specific task. Function also helps in code reusability. As you have written a function and whenever you have the similar requirement, you can call the same function without writing the whole code again. Now let's create a very simple function in Kotlin. So the syntax is we use the fun keyword to define a function, then we give the function a name. For example, I will create a function that will roll the dice. So I have a function ready that is called roll dice. So you use this fun keyword, then you need to put the function name, then you need to use parenthesis, and inside curly braces you will write the block of the code that you want to be inside the function. And whenever you will call this function, for example, I can call the function inside the main function, what will happen is everything written inside this block will be executed. So I want to roll a dice here, and whenever we roll the dice we get a value between 1 to 6. So here I will generate a random value between 1 to 6, and it is very easy. I will just write val result to store the random value, and then I will create a range from 1 to 6. So this is how we create a range in Kotlin. We use double dots, and then I will call another function that is random. Now this random function will return a random value between this range, and the random value will be assigned to this result val. And finally we can write println and result. Now if I run the code, let's run it. You can see I got 5. If I run it again, 6. So every time I am running the code, I am getting a random value, as you can see here. So here I am calling this function, and whenever I want to generate or display a random number, I can call the same function. So you can call the function as many times as you want. And this is how we create a function in Kotlin. Now this is a very simple syntax of the function, but we can also pass an argument to a function if required. For example, I have called this function 3 times, but instead of doing this, I can write an argument here. Let's say I have times of type int. Now what I can do here is I can pass a value that will define that how many times we need to generate a random number between 1 to 6, or in simple words, how many times we need to roll the dice. So I will delete all these things here, and this time I will pass an argument to our function roll dice. So we can pass any integer because the argument accepts an integer, but you can play with different data types. For now we are passing an integer. Now we need to generate the random number this times, and to do this we can use a loop. So let's say for I in 0 until times, like this. And now we will generate the random number given times. So let's run the code again. You can see we have 4 random numbers If I run it again, I have different set of values, so it is working fine. So this is how we create a function that accepts an argument. And we can also pass multiple arguments to a function. For example, here we are passing the times, like how many times we need to roll the dice. But what if we also want to change the range? Right now it is 1 to 6, but we can accept one more parameter here. So we can write range, that is of type int range. And then instead of 1 to 6, we can pass range here like this. Now here for the next parameter, we can pass the range. For example, we want to roll the dice 4 times and the range is 1 to 6. And we can even change this range. So this is how we can pass multiple arguments to a function. So all the parameters that you need in your function, you can separate it using a comma. So right now we have 2 parameters, but you can write as many parameters as you want. So based on your requirement, you will define the parameters. I will run the code again. You can see this time we got random values between 1 to 10 and we have 4 random values because the first parameter was 4. So we learned how we can create a function and how we can pass arguments to a function. Now in case you do not have a fixed number of arguments for your function, in this scenario you can create a function that can accept variable number of arguments. For example, I need to create a function that will sum a given set of integers. So what I can do here is I can write fun get sum. Now this time this function will accept variable number of arguments, and if you want to pass variable number of arguments to your function, you need to use the keyword that is var. It means variable arguments. And now I want to pass nums of type integer. And here simply we can print the sum. So we have nums dot sum like this. Now if I call this function, so I will comment out this one and I will call get sum, and I can pass variable number of arguments now because this function accepts variable arguments. So let's say we pass 5, 5, 10, 20. So you can pass any number of arguments now. Right now I have passed 4 arguments, 4 integers. Now if I run the code, I will get the sum that should be 40. So you can see we are getting 40. So this is how we can pass variable number of arguments to a function. Kotlin also supports default arguments. For example, in this roll dice function, we do not have any default value for the arguments, and that is why it is necessary to pass the arguments. So if we don't pass the argument, we will get a compile time error, and it is saying us that no value passed for parameter range and times. But if you give default value to the arguments, it is not necessary to pass the parameters because we have a default value available. So I will write it like this, and I will give some default value. For example, if we do not pass any value for times, it will generate a random int 1 time. And if we also do not pass a value for range, it will take 1 to 6 as the default range. So now you can see the error is gone. So if we pass some value, let's say we pass times and we pass a range. Now in this case, we are passing the values for the parameters. So in this case, it will take 5 as times and range as given range. But if we do not pass any value, it will take the default values available. So this is very handy to define functions sometimes, because sometimes we do not have values to pass. So in that case, or for that case, we can define default values for our functions. So now I will run the code, but oops, I was writing the roll dice function inside the function getSum. So that's okay. I will uncomment this roll dice from main function. I will remove all the parameters and I will comment out this getSum. Now if I run the code, I will get a random value one time, as you can see here. Because we called the roll dice function and we have default values available for the function roll dice. So when you have a default value available or default values available, it is not necessary to pass the parameters value because we already have the default value. In Kotlin, we can also name the arguments. For example, I will create one more function that will accept multiple parameters. So let's create a function that will make a burger. So we have a function make burger, and this function will accept many parameters. For example, we will pass size of the burger. Then we will pass extra cheese. Then we can pass make it a meal, as you get in any food chain. So it is also Boolean. And then finally we have the type of the burger as string. Now inside the function we will just print all the values. So we have size as size, extra cheese, make it a meal, and type. Now we can call this function make burger. So I will comment out all these two and I will call the function make burger. For the size, I will pass XL, you can pass any string. Then we have extra cheese as true, make it a meal as true, and let's say we have a chicken burger. Now we will run the code. So it is absolutely fine. But what if you have a lot of arguments in your function? So in that case, you can use named arguments. So whenever you define a function and when you call the function, you need to pass the parameters in the same sequence that is defined in the function definition. But if you use named arguments, it is not necessary to pass the parameters in the same sequence. So I will show you. Let's delete this and call the make burger again. Now it accepts type, that is at the end, but I can pass the type as the first parameter. So what we will do is we will write the name of the argument or parameter and we will pass the value like this. Then we have size. Then we have make it a meal and extra cheese. So this is also sometimes very handy when we have a lot of arguments in our functions. So this is called name arguments in Kotlin functions. And if you use named arguments, you do not need to pass all the parameters in the same sequence. So if I run the code again, I will get the same output, as you can see here. We can also return a value from a function, and all these functions that we have defined so far are not returning anything. So the return type is nothing. But in case you need to return a value from your function, you can use the return keyword, and in that case you also need to define the return type for your function. For example, I will take this getSum function. So if I want to return the sum from this function, what I can do is I can define the return type. So in this case, it will return an int. Now, instead of printing the sum, what I will do is I will write return, this is a keyword, and I will write nums.sum. Now this time it will not print the sum, but it will return the summed value. So inside the main function, I will comment it out, and this time I can create a val. I can call the function getSum, and I can pass a sequence of integers like this. Now this function will return the summed value and it will be assigned to this sum val. Now if I print ln the sum, I will get the sum of given numbers like this. So this is how we return a value from a function. We write a colon, we define a return type, and then using the return keyword, we return the value that we need to return from the function. Also remember, this return is end of the function. So anything you write after this return will not be executed. So you need to put return only at the end of the function. Now the last thing that I would like to tell you is the single expression functions. For example, inside this getSum function, we are writing only a single line expression. Now if you have this case for your function, you can concise the code a little more. And what you can do is, instead of writing all these, you can delete everything. You can write equals to and then nums.sum like this. So now we have way less code than before. Now if I run the code, I will get the same output. Let me show you. We are getting 15. So if you have only one line for your function, you can use it as a single expression function like this. So that's all for functions, friend. Thanks for watching.